The distress signal, the observation dome of Research Station Epsilon, floated in perfect silence, its transparent walls revealing the crimson glow of the dying star below. Dr. Venna Thrace pressed her three-fingered hand against the cool surface, watching solar flares dance across the collapsing giant's surface. She had spent 12 cycles studying this star's death, documenting every fluctuation in its energy output, every shift in its gravitational field. The Velkari people prided themselves on their scientific achievements, and Venna intended to add her name to the great archives of knowledge that stretched back 10,000 years. Behind her, the monitoring station hummed with quiet efficiency. Dozens of sensors tracked radiation levels, gravitational waves, and quantum fluctuations. Her research team of 8 moved between workstations with practiced ease, their pale blue skin luminescent under the soft artificial lighting. The Velkari had explored space for millennia, cataloging stars and planets across their region of the galaxy. They were observers, recorders, peaceful seekers of understanding who avoided conflict and prized knowledge above all else. Suddenly, a sharp tone pierced the calm atmosphere. Junior researcher Kelm looked up from his console, his large black eyes widening with confusion. The equipment was registering something impossible. Deep beneath the star's outer layers, something had activated. An energy signature pulsed outward, carrying a pattern that made no sense according to any natural phenomenon they had documented. Venna moved swiftly to his station, her movements fluid in the low-gravity environment. The data scrolling across the screen made her breath catch. This was not stellar activity. This was artificial. Something technological existed within the dying star. Something that had just awakened after what appeared to be thousands of years of dormancy. The energy pattern repeated in precise intervals, and as she watched, their translation algorithms began parsing the signal's structure. It was a message. More specifically, it was a distress call using protocols so ancient that their computer barely recognized the format. The Velkari had discovered similar signals before, remnants of long-dead civilizations that once flourished before catastrophe claimed them. The galaxy was full of ghosts, species that had risen and fallen, leaving only ruins and fading transmissions behind. This signal, however, remained strong, its power source somehow sustained through centuries of stellar decay. Venna called an emergency meeting of her senior staff. Within minutes, 5 of her most experienced researchers gathered around the main analysis table, where a holographic projection displayed the signal's structure. Chief Engineer Prax spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of his 40 years of experience. The beacon appeared to be built using technology far beyond anything in their databases. Its power generation system drew energy directly from the star's fusion processes, explaining how it had survived so long. The message itself repeated a simple plea for assistance, along with coordinates pointing to a location 300 light-years away. The debate that followed consumed hours. Some argued they should simply record the discovery and report it to the Velkari Science Council. Others believed they had a moral obligation to investigate further. After all, what if some remnant of the civilization that built this beacon still survived? What if people somewhere desperately needed help? Venna found herself torn between caution and curiosity. The signal's sophistication suggested its creators possessed remarkable capabilities. Perhaps they could learn from such advanced knowledge. Finally, Senior Analyst Mora proposed a compromise. They could amplify and rebroadcast the signal, sending it out across wider frequencies and distances. If anyone in the galaxy still monitored for such messages, they would hear it and could respond appropriately. The Velkari Research Station would simply be facilitating communication, not taking direct action themselves. This satisfied the cautious members of the team while honoring their scientific duty to preserve and share knowledge. Venna approved the plan. Over the next 2 cycles, Prax and his engineering team modified their most powerful communications array. They built a relay system that could capture the ancient signal, enhance its strength, and broadcast it across multiple quantum frequencies simultaneously. The process required delicate calibration, but the Velkari excelled at such precise work. When they finally activated the amplification system, the ancient distress call blazed across the cosmos with unprecedented power, racing through the darkness toward distant stars and unknown worlds. What the Velkari did not understand, what they could not have known, was the true nature of the signal they had unleashed. The beacon was not simply a distress call from a dead civilization. It was a weapon activation protocol, a last resort emergency broadcast designed to summon warriors from the most dangerous species the ancient galaxy had ever known. The civilization that built it had faced extinction from an enemy they could not defeat alone, and in desperation, they had called upon allies who lived on worlds of fire and ice, who thrived in gravity that would crush lesser beings, who had evolved through constant struggle and emerged as apex predators. They had called upon the Deathworlders. 40,000 light-years away, deep within a spiral arm the Velkari had never explored, the amplified signal reached Earth. The planet rotated peacefully in its orbit, unaware that everything was about to change. On the dark side, where cities glowed like constellations against the night, the Deep Space Monitoring Network maintained its constant vigil. Hundreds of radio telescopes and quantum sensors listened to the cosmic background, searching for patterns in the noise, hoping to find proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. Specialist Maria Chen sat in the monitoring station beneath the Arizona desert, drinking her third coffee of a long night shift. She had worked for the network for 5 years, and in all that time she had never seen anything more interesting than distant pulsar emissions and the occasional space debris. She expected tonight to be no different. When the signal appeared on her screen, she almost dismissed it as a malfunction. The pattern was too regular, too purposeful to be natural, yet too strange to match any human transmission. She ran diagnostic checks, confirmed her equipment was functioning properly, then called her supervisor. Within 20 minutes, every station in the network had locked onto the signal. Within an hour, the world's leading scientists were analyzing its structure. Within 3 hours, military officials had been briefed. And within 6 hours, the president of the United Earth Alliance was sitting in a secure briefing room, listening to experts explain that humanity had just received its first confirmed message from an alien civilization. The message was a distress call. The translation algorithms had worked through the mathematical patterns embedded in the signal structure, converting alien concepts into human language. Someone somewhere in the galaxy was asking for help. The coordinates pointed toward a region of space humanity had never explored, a distance that would require their fastest ships weeks to traverse. Debate erupted immediately. Some argued this might be a trap, a lure to draw humanity into an ambush. Others insisted this was the most important moment in human history, a chance to announce their presence to the galaxy as a species willing to help others in need. Admiral Marcus Stone listened to the arguments with growing impatience. He was a veteran of the resource wars, a scarred soldier who had seen the worst of human conflict and emerged believing that strength existed to protect the weak. His gray eyes scanned the faces around the table, reading their fear and uncertainty. When the room finally quieted, he spoke with quiet authority. They were wasting time debating while someone out there was dying. Humanity had built the most advanced military fleet in their history, designed to defend Earth from any threat. Now they had a chance to use that power for something greater than war among themselves. The president studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She authorized the deployment of the Terran Expeditionary Force, humanity's first deep space combat fleet. The mission would be classified at the highest level. Admiral Stone would command with full authority to engage or withdraw as the situation demanded. They would jump into the unknown, find the source of that distress call, and show the galaxy what kind of species humanity had become. Within 48 hours, the fleet assembled in high orbit above Earth. The flagship was the Hammer of Dawn, a dreadnought-class warship stretching 3 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with railguns, missile batteries, and energy weapons that could crack a moon. Around it gathered 20 escort vessels, destroyers built for speed and precision strikes, cruisers equipped with advanced sensor arrays, and assault carriers holding thousands of Marines trained for combat in any environment. The fleet represented humanity's determination to survive in a hostile universe. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of the Hammer of Dawn, watching Earth slowly rotate below. He thought about the journey ahead, about the unknown dangers they would face. Humanity had spent its entire existence confined to one star system, fighting among themselves, never knowing if they were alone. Now they were about to step onto a galactic stage, announcing their presence not with words of peace but with weapons of war drawn in defense of strangers. It was a beginning he could be proud of. The order went out across all ships. Navigation systems locked onto the coordinates from the distress signal. Quantum drives began spinning up, creating artificial wormholes that would fold space and allow faster-than-light travel. Marcus felt the familiar vibration as the massive ship prepared to jump. Around him, hundreds of crew members worked at their stations, focused and professional. They were soldiers, explorers, and representatives of their species all at once. The countdown reached 0. Reality twisted as the fleet vanished from Earth orbit, beginning a journey that would take them across the galaxy to answer a call for help from aliens who had no idea what they had summoned. The Deathworlders were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Deathworlders arrive. The journey through quantum space felt like falling through frozen lightning. Admiral Marcus Stone gripped the armrest of his command chair as the hammer of dawn shuddered through the artificial wormhole. Around him, status displays flickered with data streams showing the fleet's position relative to normal space. They had been traveling for 16 days, making calculated jumps across hundreds of light years, following the coordinates embedded in that ancient distress signal. Each jump brought them deeper into unexplored territory, farther from Earth than any human had ever ventured. Lieutenant Sarah Park looked up from the navigation console, her face pale but determined. They were approaching the final jump coordinates. Whatever waited for them at the destination would reveal itself in minutes. Marcus ordered all ships to battle stations. Throughout the fleet, klaxons sounded as thousands of personnel rushed to their positions. Weapon systems powered up, shields calibrated to maximum strength, and fighter pilots climbed into their cockpits. Humanity was about to announce its presence to the galaxy, and Marcus intended to make that announcement count. The fleet emerged from quantum space into chaos. The view screen blazed with light as weapons fire crisscrossed the darkness. Directly ahead, a massive circular structure rotated slowly in the void, its metallic surface scarred and burning. The station appeared to be built around an enormous dying star that pulsed with deep crimson light. But the station itself was under siege. Dozens of organic-looking ships swarmed around it like insects, their hulls covered in chitinous armor that gleamed with an oily sheen. They fired bioplasma weapons that ate through the station's hull, tearing chunks of metal away with each impact. Marcus recognized a slaughter when he saw one. The station's defensive weapons fired sporadically, but whoever built it had clearly designed it for research, not war. The attacking ships moved with coordinated precision, suggesting a hive intelligence directing their actions. As he watched, one section of the station exploded silently, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Small escape pods launched desperately from undamaged sections, but the attacking ships hunted them down methodically, destroying each one with casual efficiency. Commander James Rodriguez appeared on the communication screen from the destroyer Swift Justice. His dark eyes burned with controlled anger as he reported what his sensors had discovered. The attacking fleet consisted of 47 vessels ranging from frigate to cruiser size, all biological in nature and all bearing the same genetic markers. They belonged to a species his database could not identify, but their behavior suggested a predatory swarm mentality. The station was broadcasting distress calls on multiple frequencies, begging for help that had not arrived until now. Marcus made his decision in seconds. All ships were to engage immediately with maximum force. The fleet would split into 3 attack groups. The first would eliminate the ships hunting escape pods, the second would break the siege around the station, and the third would serve as a reserve to counter any unexpected threats. Rules of engagement were simple: destroy anything that showed hostility, protect anything that appeared civilian. He transmitted the orders across encrypted channels, and the Terran fleet exploded into action. The Hammer of Dawn accelerated toward the nearest cluster of enemy vessels, its massive bulk moving with surprising speed. The main railgun batteries opened fire, launching tungsten penetrators at a significant fraction of light speed. The kinetic rounds punched through the first enemy ship's organic armor like it was paper, creating a chain reaction of secondary explosions as the vessel's internal systems ruptured. Before the wreckage had stopped tumbling, 8 more enemy ships died in the opening salvo, torn apart by weapons they had never encountered before. The alien swarm reacted with shocking speed, turning their attention from the dying station to this new threat. Bioplasma bolts streaked toward the human fleet, weapons designed to dissolve molecular bonds and reduce matter to its component atoms. The Hammer of Dawn's energy shields flared as they absorbed the impacts, sophisticated force fields that converted incoming energy into harmless radiation. The human ship barely slowed, continuing its devastating assault as it carved through the enemy formation like a knife through flesh. Fighter squadrons launched from the assault carriers, small agile craft piloted by men and women who had trained their entire lives for combat. They swept around the larger capital ships, engaging enemy fighters in swirling dogfights that painted the void with tracer fire and explosions. Human pilots pushed their aircraft to G-forces that would have killed most species, their enhanced pressure suits keeping them conscious as they pulled maneuvers that defied physics. Within minutes, they had established air superiority, clearing the space around the escape pod so rescue operations could begin. The destroyer Swift Justice lived up to its name, racing ahead of the main fleet to intercept the ships hunting survivors. Its point defense systems created a web of laser fire that vaporized incoming missiles, while its main weapons locked onto enemy vessels with computer-assisted precision. Commander Rodriguez directed his crew with calm efficiency, calling out targets and firing solutions as his ship danced through the chaos. 3 enemy ships died in as many minutes, their hulls shattered by focused magnetic accelerator fire that struck with the force of small nuclear weapons. On the Hammer of Dawn's bridge, Marcus watched the battle unfold through multiple tactical displays. The enemy was brave, he would grant them that. Despite losing nearly a third of their fleet in the opening minutes, they continued attacking with suicidal determination. But bravery alone could not overcome the technological and tactical superiority humanity had developed through centuries of warfare. Every human ship was a masterpiece of military engineering, designed by a species that had learned to wage war in the most hostile environment imaginable, their own planet. The second attack group, led by the cruiser Valiant Spirit, reached the station and established a defensive perimeter. Captain Helen Foster coordinated with the station's automated systems, identifying the most critical damage points and prioritizing targets accordingly. Her ship's weapons spoke with methodical precision, eliminating enemy vessels one by one as they tried to press their attack. Simultaneously, her crew deployed emergency repair drones that sealed hull breaches and stabilized the station's failing life support systems. Humanity was showing the galaxy that they could fight and save lives at the same time. Inside Research Station Epsilon, Dr. Venna Thrace clung to a support beam as another explosion rocked the structure. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows, and the air had grown thin as atmosphere leaked from dozens of breaches. Around her, the surviving members of her research team huddled together, their pale blue skin now showing deep purple bruising from trauma and oxygen deprivation. They had sent their distress call knowing it was likely futile, that the ancient beacon they had amplified would reach no one who cared. The Valkyrie had no military, no warriors to call upon. They were scientists and explorers, utterly unprepared for the violence that had found them. The Kryn swarm had detected their signal and interpreted it as a declaration of territorial claim. The insectoid species viewed any technological advancement in their region of space as a potential threat to be eliminated immediately. They did not negotiate, did not consider mercy. They simply consumed and destroyed, expanding their territory through ruthless aggression. Venna had watched through the observation dome as her colleagues died, as the ships they had summoned turned their weapons on defenseless escape pods. She had accepted her death, prayed to the ancient spirits of her people, and waited for the end. Then the impossible happened. New ships appeared, vessels unlike anything in the Valkyrie databases. They were angular and brutal, covered in armor plating and weapons that spoke with terrible authority. The newcomers attacked the Kryn with a ferocity that shocked Venna to her core. These were not researchers or merchants defending themselves reluctantly. These were warriors, a military force that fought with practiced efficiency and overwhelming power. Within minutes, the tide of battle had completely reversed. A proximity alert sounded as something large docked with the station's main airlock. Venna's heart raced as she watched the external cameras, expecting to see Kryn boarding parties coming to finish what their ships had started. Instead, she saw armored figures in powered exoskeletons moving with purpose and precision. They wore strange symbols on their armor, and they carried weapons that looked designed to fight nightmares. When the airlock cycled open, she found herself facing creatures she had never imagined. They stood upright on 2 legs like the Valkyrie, but they were taller, broader, built with dense muscle and thick bones. Their faces were hidden behind helmets with glowing visors, but their body language spoke of controlled strength and readiness for violence. One of them stepped forward and a voice emerged from its helmet speaker, words translated into Velkari language through some advanced system. The creature identified itself as Captain Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Marines, and it announced that rescue operations were underway. Medical teams were coming to treat the injured, and transport ships would evacuate all survivors to safety. Venna tried to speak, to ask who these beings were and why they had come, but her oxygen-deprived mind could not form the words. She watched as the armored figures spread through the station with military efficiency, finding survivors and providing immediate medical care. They moved wounded researchers onto stretchers with surprising gentleness, their powerful hands careful not to cause additional injury. These warriors were trained to save as well as kill, and they performed both tasks with equal skill. Outside, the battle reached its conclusion. The Kryn swarm had been reduced to 7 ships, and those survivors were attempting to flee. Admiral Marcus Stone watched them go, calculating whether pursuit was necessary. Commander Rodriguez advocated for hunting them down and eliminating the threat completely, but Marcus shook his head. They had accomplished their objective. The station was secure, survivors were being rescued, and humanity had made its point. Let the survivors carry news of this encounter back to their leaders. Let them tell the galaxy that a new power had arrived, one that protected the innocent and destroyed those who preyed on the weak. The evacuation took 6 hours. Human medical teams worked alongside Velkari survivors, learning their biology on the fly and adapting treatment protocols in real time. The versatility and adaptability that had allowed humanity to colonize every environment on Earth served them well here, as doctors and medics figured out how to treat injuries in physiology completely different from their own. By the time the last survivor was safely aboard a human ship, over 300 Velkari lives had been saved from certain death. Dr. Venna Thrace found herself in the medical bay of the Hammer of Dawn, breathing oxygen-enriched air while a human doctor monitored her vital signs. Through the transparent walls, she could see other survivors receiving care. The humans moved among them with quiet competence, their faces showing concern and determination. These were not the faces of conquerors or enslavers. These were rescuers, people who had crossed the galaxy to answer a call for help from strangers they had never met. When she finally had the strength to speak, she asked the question that burned in her mind. Why had they come? How had they even received the signal? The human doctor, a woman named Dr. Jennifer Torres, smiled gently and explained. The ancient beacon Venna had amplified had reached Earth, a planet 40,000 light-years away. Humanity had heard the call and assembled their fleet to respond. They came because it was the right thing to do, because they believed that civilized species had a responsibility to protect each other from those who would do harm. Venna felt tears forming in her large black eyes. The Velkari had amplified that beacon thinking it would reach no one, or at most some archaeologists interested in ancient history. Instead, they had summoned warriors from a death world, beings who had evolved in crushing gravity and brutal conditions, who had learned to fight and survive in ways the peaceful Velkari could never imagine. These humans came from a planet they called Earth, where natural disasters killed millions, where predators hunted and were hunted, where the very environment tested every living thing to its limits, and yet, despite all that violence in their nature and history, they had chosen to use their strength to protect rather than conquer. They had crossed the galaxy not to claim territory or resources, but to answer a distress call from people they did not know. In that moment, Venna understood that the galaxy had changed forever. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they had announced themselves not as a threat, but as guardians. Admiral Marcus Stone stood in the observation deck of the Hammer of Dawn, watching as engineering crews began permanent repairs on Research Station Epsilon. Behind him, Commander Rodriguez approached with a data tablet containing preliminary reports. The Kryn survivors had indeed fled toward their home territory, and intelligence suggested their leaders were already receiving reports of the engagement. News of humanity's intervention was spreading across multiple communication networks, reaching civilizations the Terran fleet had never contacted. Marcus considered the implications. Humanity had wanted to find intelligent life among the stars, had hoped to join some galactic community as equals. Instead, they had arrived as warriors, their first contact a battle rather than a diplomatic greeting. But looking at the rescued Velkari, at the station they had saved from destruction, he felt no regret. Sometimes the galaxy needed warriors. Sometimes strength existed not to dominate, but to defend those who could not defend themselves. The future remained uncertain. Other species would react to humanity's presence with fear, suspicion, or perhaps hope. There would be more conflicts, more challenges, more moments when humanity would have to choose between safety and righteousness. But for now, they had made their choice clear. The Deathworlders of Earth had heard a distress call echoing through the darkness, and they had answered with overwhelming force dedicated to a simple purpose: protecting the innocent. The galaxy would never forget this moment. Neither would humanity. They had taken their first steps among the stars not as explorers or traders, but as protectors. And in the void of space, where the hammer of dawn floated among the rescued and the saved, Admiral Marcus Stone allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had finally found its place in the universe, and it was exactly where they belonged, standing between the darkness and those who needed shelter from it.